Well, for more on sacred architecture, I spoke to Andrew Crompton. He's an architect and researcher from the University of Liverpool. And I asked him how religious design and sacred architecture has changed throughout the centuries.
Well, if you look at one of the peaks of sacred architecture occurs in the Baroque, when you get painting and music and architecture all joined together in one unified work of art. It's like opera, and everything works together. And in the Catholic Church, in the Baroque period, you have these wonderful services with music and ritual, which completely consume the individual who joins in. It's a complete environment. It's just like they're sort of building heaven, but complete with smells and noise and beautiful things happening.
Now you mentioned the way that things have changed. Give us an idea of just how much sacred architecture has progressed over the centuries.
It starts high, and it has had some of the greatest achievements of the human race have been in sacred architecture. I'm thinking particularly of in Europe, in Gothic cathedrals, and in the Baroque work in Rome and in Europe elsewhere. But since the Reformation in Europe, people have stopped trying to show what God is like, and they've tried to describe what God is like in words, which meant that after Luther, the church has been stripped of its meaning, and it becomes something like a white box. So architecture has been kind of cast down as something that is perhaps to certain people after in the Protestant era, it's an impediment almost.
So when you're talking about architecture and how the modern world seems to be moving further away from really faith-based architecture, and you said, as you were saying, kind of turns it into just a white box, is there then still a need for sacred architecture?
In one sense, no. People are sublimating their need for religious experience into other modes of life, such as art or music, and they're inventing their own rituals. People are developing an idea of a personal God. The idea that we should worship in common is something that we're losing in our lives. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, you know, there is good and bad in it.
So what are some examples of modern sacred architecture?
Well, in the 20th century, there are modern buildings which are configured as churches. Some of them are very beautiful. There's some wonderful German modern examples, and there's I think of Dominicus Bohm, for example, in Germany, and his son Gottfried Bohm did a church at Naviges, which is the craziest building I've ever been in a lifetime looking at buildings. It's a kind of concrete. It's like the Alps built in concrete with a room inside, and it's as if the idea, it's as if traditional ideas of architecture have no longer working for sacred architecture, and people are trying to find ever more outre and entertaining ways to express themselves, which is not necessarily a good sign.
So in terms of the pace then of sacred architecture, is this something that you expect to see decline?
Oh yes, religion is in decline all over the world. And I don't think we will ever, unless there's some change in the fundamental nature of man, we will never again see the beautiful buildings of the past, like the Gothic cathedrals, like the mosques in Istanbul and Cairo, or temples in India. They are things of the past, and they must be preserved and very carefully looked after, because we can simply never do them again.
So then, in terms of the mindset of the architect, when they're building a lot of this sacred architecture, what is their intended impact for the faithful, for people who want to have that religious experience?
In the modern era, you get architects like, say, Tadao Ando in Japan, who do these beautiful white illuminated boxes, which are very like art galleries. And I think they have the same kind of aesthetic. But in the past, when men built cathedrals, they were working in teams, and they never expected to see the building constructed in their own lifetime. It was something that went on for generations. They would take hundreds of years over a building, and that's difficult to understand today when we want to throw money at a problem and see results straight away. We don't have the patience or the understanding to do what our ancestors did, which is very sad.